Hello, this is Renjit Philip. Thank you for listening to FS Brew. If you enjoyed this episode, I'll be grateful if you can subscribe to the podcast and leave us a review. This will help us to reach more awesome listeners like you. Thank you. Hi, welcome to Hype. So, where we go deeper into a trending topic and give a twist from an insurance perspective. Today's hot topic is open insurance. Shall we, Vidya, start with the definition of open insurance?
I think that'll be a good one to start with, Ranjit. So, go ahead.
So, we found this definition by Accenture, which was pretty good. We felt it's really a new way of doing business, right? Which enables insurers to boost revenues, unlock partnerships, increase efficiencies. And it's all about providing a set of external data into their system and allowing external partners to use the insurer's own data to use in various forms. Where can the insurers use it? They can use it in underwriting, claims, proposition development, so on and so forth.
Yeah. No, yeah, absolutely. So earlier it was always insurance plugging into a partner's ecosystem and sharing, insurers' data or using limitedly the partner's data to underwrite the business. Here it's going to be like a two-way, sharing and consuming data from both ways. So you have suddenly access to multiple data points from an insurer's perspective, which you can use, as you rightly said, cleverly for building, strong customer segments, or you're developing great proposition, or generally you want to raise your stickiness with the customer. So it just opens up this whole possibility for an insurer in a whole new way, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think in addition to obviously the technology and perhaps the privacy angle of data, there's also a new skill set that it's required to support open insurance, and that is about partnership management and collaboration, right? Because you're suddenly having to deal with multiple organizations which are not really in your value chain. Earlier, you used to deal with brokers and agents, but now it could be somebody else.
Oh, yeah, totally. No, that's a very valid point. And how do you nurture that partnership in a way that is fair, it's open, it is, it is profitable for both parties, and it is fair from a customer perspective as well.
Yeah.
So Ranjit, so now that we understood what is open insurance and how the whole exchange and sharing of data happens as part of this proposition, the first question that came to my mind was typically who these organizations with whom as insurers you can partner with, you can share your data, you can consume your data, and what are these typical data sets that look like? These data sets are, my understanding is from different relevant sources such as your government authorities, like for instance RTA in the UAE, or even the recently introduced Roads General Authority in Saudi Arabia, or even financial data from banks or payment provider, or even you can look at customer data that can flow through from social media channels into the insurer system, which you can use it for understanding customer behavior. Or even for large and complex risks, I think access to maybe some specific data points like weather conditions, climate change impact, etc., can all be a game changer. What do you think, Ranjan?
No, I agree. I think what you have mentioned correctly is all those external data sources, which, to be honest, nobody is stopping the insurers from using these today, except probably an ease of accessing those data points. We've heard of insurers abroad who use the weather data to craft, weather-related, crop-related insurance, for example. Or we have learned of people using travel insurance, which is triggered by flight delays, and obviously that data comes from outside. So this is a very good example of those external data points, which we talked about in our definition.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, Vidya, now that we have defined what open insurance is, let's get into a few examples that we found. You were talking about Ping An.
Yeah, so Ping An, great company in China, generally anyway very flamboyant in the different things that they do. Now they have opened up parts of their information technology infrastructure to the outside world. We don't know the specifics of it, but to the partners that they've opened it up to, they are monetizing those data sources. So now this is them giving information to the partner, and they're also building open platforms that are accessible to many participants in industries such as financial services, automotive repairs, healthcare, and real estate. Now, so it should be the two-way, and therefore, I'm sure Pingyan must be enriched by the data that's flowing in from all these sort of industries.
Yeah.
Maybe Renjit, yours an example
Yeah,
that
I mean,
you.
I think we looked at that Accenture report and we figured out that there's a UK life insurance company called
Yeah.
Anaprak, which is working with a fintech company to use consumer data essentially to provide fine-tuned life insurance product recommendations and pricing. So it's using fintech data to give life insurance related recommendations, which kind of makes sense because
Yeah.
you do take life insurance based on your income earning potential and so on and so forth.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So another example that we sort of picked up from the report is Reliance Partners. They're based in the US and they work with a supply chain technology firm called Project 44. That gives them access to real-time cargo insurance, to offer real-time cargo insurance to the shippers and the logistics service providers. Now, their open insurance service allows their customers to get quotes and buy on a real-time basis, but based on obviously many complex risks that now it's able to compute and customize because of this whole open insurance module that they have going with this technology firm.
Right, right, and it looks very much like sort of an embedded play.
Yeah,
So issue cargo insurance as and when the shipments are booked.
correct. And based
Very
on the risk,
interesting.
yeah,
And the other one was this, very quaintly named insurer called La Parisienne, but now it's called Wacam, uh, has over 50 open insurance APIs. So that's pretty much a leading, player
yeah,
if you look at that. You know,
true,
there are many companies, as we know, in this region who probably have motor to some extent and travel, but
yeah,
haven't really heard of any other products getting that kind of coverage. So this is happening in France, and they are opening up their model across Europe, and they've tied up with an IoT network provider called Sigfox to offer connected insurance solutions. So they're trying to
yeah,
use this as a sort of a platform play where insurers and other companies can plug in. So it's not just for their own purpose, but for enabling the entire ecosystem, which is an interesting play. So
yeah.
there are the point is, and I think they're handling about 10 million API calls a month, which is a significant number.
Wow,
So it's being used a lot.
yeah.
So that means it is not something new, and it's working well in other regions of the world, which is a good sign.
Yeah. Now you spoke about this region. I think one example that I could think of is on the motor insurance side. I know, RTA had opened up its data points to insurers, so insurers could log in, pick up some, customer details about, different aspects, whether their car history or, so on and so forth. Now that was quite useful for the insurance to understand the risk profile. And I know that they're currently still in the process of opening up a lot more data points. So that might be a good example of how an external data point is flowing into the insurer for a great purpose. Really.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I think in the past episodes we have spoken about how some of these companies are using Emirates ID information and
Yes.
RTA information to issue policies very fast. Like
Yeah.
one of the players that we talked about briefly before we recorded this session, Shori.
Yeah.
So and many others are doing it as well. So
Yes, absolutely. So all of this will just, completely enhance the quality of data and then therefore the service that they're able to provide back to the customer from a insurer perspective, isn't it?
yes, absolutely.
Ranjit, what does it take to be ready from a system readiness point of view to build open insurance capabilities? Now, this is a very critical question because we are still in the process of digitization and all of those things which we are doing a lot of catch up on. So this may be quite a heavy load from insurer perspective. Some thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, you're right. I think a lot of companies have not yet completed their sort of digital journeys. So now
Yeah,
opening APIs into their core system is a project that they don't probably want to take on. And this is
yeah,
where probably the regulatory aspect will force them to do it.
yeah,
Uh, what are the
yeah,
considerations? I think security is one obvious consideration where
yeah,
third party is getting access into your core system. So how do you manage that in such a way that customer data is protected?
yeah.
uh, Performance. Now, if you open it up to a number of players, will your system be able to manage the flow of data and
True.
still be, standing, so to
Yeah,
say? So
true.
perhaps some of the insurers may find that going to cloud for just this API part makes sense because the cloud can scale up and down. Uh,
Correct.
yeah, so I think
Yeah, no,
those are
that's
some
an
of the aspects.
important point. Yeah, no, important point because I think still we are all in this cloud migration, cloud transition sort of a thing.
Yeah,
And then every time there is an IT change, it tends to take on months simply because the basic infrastructure is not always ready. So to be able to be ready for open insurance, you've got to be extremely modular in that sense. Yeah.
yeah. And talking about modular piece, I think just to manage that scaling load, your core system has to have all those good micro services aspect, everything,
Yes.
so that they're independently able to scale up and down.
Correct, correct, absolutely.
Yeah.
No, good points, and just also just the ability to build APIs itself, on top of all of this, which is so
Yes.
important. But your ability to have those open APIs, at least at the base level, and then to be able to write more as and when based on the partners that come in. So those are all core competencies that you need to have as an organization and an investment to think about.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. And if you take this discussion forward a little bit,
Yeah.
uh, what do you think about sort of the product lines where it makes sense to go open? Do you think life, non-life?
Yeah, no, it's a good one to think about. When you think about life, it's I feel it has such vibrant content, right? And there's also that extremely sensitive content that can flow in from the external partners like the hospitals or pharmacies or any of those places into the insurers. But then there is a whole sensitivity piece, customer privacy piece, which a customer
Yeah,
should be okay to be able to give it. All of that. If you're a responsible insurer, you know that if you responsibly use that information, you'll be able to craft beautiful products, meaningful products, and also give service levels that is of real value to the customer. But then it has to be done responsibly, which means there is this interdiction that needs to come from the regulator to be able to create that standards and processes and protocols in place. On the
yeah.
non-life side, what do you think? What are your views on that?
Yeah, I think we have to look at it from a customer's point of view.
Yeah.
Now, when we're talking open insurance, it's really the regulators are going to come with a standard which allows my insurer to, or rather me to share my data, which is held with an insurance company with other players. And those players could be insurtechs, could be insurers, so on and so forth. So I, as a customer, will be happy to share my information if it is giving me an advantage. And what could be the advantage? The obvious one is obviously a price advantage. The other one is, efficiencies, right? I don't have to enter data all over again for an application form which is
Yeah.
existing in another insurance company's database, right? So
Yeah.
there could be a lot of efficiencies being unlocked. The From my point of view as well, if you're, let's say, if I am not a person who wants to commit fraud, the cost of fraud is borne by all of us, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
if insurance companies are sharing information on claims, I'm actually happy to support it because in the long run, it will bring down my premium
Yes.
because I'm not doing anything nefarious. So I think that's the sort of framework that we could adopt for both life and non-life, and that's where the customer will be like, okay, I'm happy to share my information or not.
Yeah, yeah. And then just, going more specifically, like you said, on claims and underwriting, I think we have some value that's coming on motor, and we discussed it previously. But also, you mentioned about travel. Travel can also be very, real time, vibrant with the open insurance services.
Yeah.
Not sure about home though, because the penetration levels in this region is pretty low. Yeah, so that's my
No,
views.
I think that's a good point. I mean, I have a counterpoint on that. Yes, you're right.
Yeah,
Home doesn't have APIs right now, and if you force them, the insurers, to make APIs, they'll be like, "Hey, the business case is not stacking up."
yeah.
But I wonder if you allow exchange of information on home and contents. Perhaps could you drive up penetration if you bring sort of low cost insurtechs which can acquire customers at a lower cost than now that the incumbents are doing now. So that's the other sort of point on should we have open API in homes.
Potentially, I think maybe it'll all lie in the proposition, in the way the product is crafted itself, so that it's meaningful. Insurtechs are able to penetrate and get that sort of customer acquisition numbers, customers for the IT maybe to look at the API build itself.
Yeah, absolutely. And we know from experience it will come down to the business case.
Yes, there'll be chapter close.
Yes. And now they're just moving on to sort of the verticals of how we underwrite the value chain, right? Going from proposition development to underwriting to claims, policy administration, so on and so forth. Uh, where do you think this can add value? I was just thinking in terms of proposition development, generally speaking, we as an insurance industry haven't created any a huge number of new products in the last uh, 15, 20 years that I've been around here in
Mhm.
UAE. And I can't think of any huge new products in the Middle East that have been rolled out recently. So, by just opening up your data and giving access to nimble insurtechs, you could see some very interesting products come up. And we have seen in India how Simbo does spectacle insurance, which is just an accidental damage product. You were talking about IVA, which has a
Yeah,
similar, I think, product here in the UAE.
correct, correct.
So all these are possible suddenly.
Yeah, absolutely. And then if you really think about, UAE or the wider GCC, Saudi, Kuwait, and the other countries within the region, it's typically energy, oil and gas, that sort of a sector. How do we use that data coming into an insurer from a large and complex risk to really, benefit that sector, and also benefit as insurers who have that capacity to take that complex risk? Then if you look at, our Dubai and Abu Dhabi, certainly we have vibrant SME culture, right? There's a huge SME sector here. How do we use data within those SME sector? You have subsectors like restaurants or retail and whatnot, and using their data flowing in for insurers to then be able to give that sort of customized proposition for them. So there is a lot of probability and possibilities if you look at it specific to our region as well.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. No, you're absolutely right. I think in the oil and gas sector, simply by using a number of these IoT sensors, you can be on top of the risk in terms of risk monitoring, and you
yeah,
can alert the installation of an upcoming disaster, which could be prevented early on.
yeah,
That's the potential, and to do even these risk surveys of these complex structures, you could potentially
yeah,
use satellite imagery, drone-based imagery, so on and so forth, and to
yeah,
flow that data into developing products and to even underwriting these policies.
yeah,
You do need an open API architecture which takes
yeah.
in some of this data, right?
Yeah, yeah, and absolutely, and it all is dictated by the appetite of that insurer. Where is it that they want to focus on to, and therefore building capabilities along those lines, and then really, all of this will just lead them to building a really strong ecosystem for themselves, because they are getting live data of the partners that they really need to build this clever proposition, and they're giving back data which is of value to the partners as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, great opportunity from that perspective, isn't it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think you're right. Open insurance will by the very nature drive ecosystem creation. Yes, because you got APIs, so and you've got risk in every business transaction, every human transaction. So if you could just plug into an insurer's uh, core system and issue a policy that suits the ecosystem, how wonderful that is. And
Yeah.
this is where it really promotes the uptake of embedded products which can be created at the point of need
Yeah.
for the ecosystem participants.
Yeah, you're absolutely right there. And then, the current situation of embedded is almost one-sided in a sense that the insurer's product is plugged onto the partner distributes it, and many times the data of that partner's customers never come back to the insurer. So it's very much guarded. So you don't really have real-time insights or values that you can drive out of those, data sets back from an insurer perspective. Whereas with this whole openness, they're able to get the data, they can utilize it better, and really go on to, like you said, building a clever ecosystem, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So this brings us to a very, very important aspect, Ranjit, which is the regulatory piece. All of this will come to life if and only if the regulator creates a framework and we have a protocol and every protocol set in place for all of us to, as insurers and as partners, to practice this whole open insurance concept in a more fair, fair way and in a proper way, isn't it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think we know from our conversations with some of the industry participants that already the central bank is taking inputs on open insurance framework.
Yeah.
First, open banking will come and open insurance will follow suit.
Right.
The important things here, like you said, privacy is huge. So how do you manage the privacy aspect, especially if it's health or medical related, that the customers would be careful about? Creating a standard for exchanging data
Yeah.
and APIs will be very important, because you don't want different players making up their own APIs, which are difficult to plug into. And I think also some sort of a timeline would have to be given to the participants. Is it non-life first, life later on? Is it claims data first, and then maybe policy related data? And would you give time for the incumbent players in the UAE to first develop their digital strategy, go to the cloud, get their
Yeah, some
systems
prerequisites.
modernized? Yeah,
Yeah,
there's a lot of work,
yeah,
pre-work that needs to be done to get there.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
and the regulator cannot just come and force you, say next year you're going open insurance. It's not going to work.
Correct. No, that's a really valid point. So that's a good one. So I always thought that it would be actually of choice versus you must have open insurance as a service. But yeah, that's a food for thought, Ranjit. If it is something that everyone must practice, then that's great. And therefore, like you said, you need to have some prerequisites ticked. And whenever any insurer and partner is practicing open insurance as a concept, it has to be done in a fair way. The data access points should be all across the similar ways or the same things, so that one doesn't have an advantage and the other has a lesser advantage and whatnot. And then all the malpractices then sort of seep in, and it defeats the point.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. In terms of choice, I think if you take a look at open banking and its adoption, the only reason why banks opened up their customer data is because the regulators forced them. At least, if you take a look at in Europe, the PSD2 regulations and stuff. So, I
Yeah.
think it will be very similar here. It will
Hmm.
be a mandate rather than choice, because
Got it.
if you look at choice, it's not really happening today. And why are we doing this? I think the central theme is we are trying to increase insurance penetration and penetration of risk management practices, because it's at the end of the day we are a very underinsured country,
Yeah.
both on life and non-life. So that's the whole point of why to do open insurance.
Yeah, no, makes sense. Absolutely. So, we look forward to what the central bank comes up in Dubai, in the UAE, and certainly we will look out for what's happening in the wider GCC as well on this front.
Yeah. Whatever you say, these are next few years are going to be very exciting in terms of insurance and open insurance.
Correct. That brings us to the end of the Hype episode. We enjoyed putting this whole subject matter together. I hope you enjoyed listening in to this episode. Thank you, and see you in the next one.
It's a pleasure to talk to you all through this podcast. So just make sure you subscribe to the podcast and our YouTube channel as well. Bye.
Bye.